Good morning, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back. Andrea and I are so happy. Wave, Andrea. Say hi to see you guys again for session 3 of critical time intervention. We want to just welcome you back. We know you're busy and we know it's hot, although some people are getting a little breeze. But welcome you back, and just some reminders that Andrea and I are still the same people from last time, in case you were hoping for substitutions. And our goals, like every session, is to hopefully give you something to think about in your work right away, immediately, and connect the sessions that we're doing, because we know a lot happens in a week between when we see you for each of these sessions. So we always start by trying to connect things so that you're getting reinforcement on topics. Again, we love to see your faces if you're camera ready. If you have a special way you want to be addressed, please change your name as it shows on your screen, and we'll call you what you would like to be called. And if you need help doing that, we can let you know how to do it. Don't wait for us to ask you what you think. Raise your hand. I know this group is very vocal. We love that. It's been such a joy for us to see you every week. As actually for us, it's really the absolute middle of the week because it's 1 p.m. So it's like the hump of the week, as they call it. And I look forward to this time slot every week because you guys have been a great group. So hopefully we'll have a lot of interaction today. We have a lot of breakouts, certainly giving you a chance to talk. And today's question, centering us, getting us thinking about something else besides whatever we came here, is whether you're a pool person or a beach person or a lake person or a river person or something else. You can see from the picture, this is one of my favorites, is when I'm at a pool with the ocean right next to it. One of my favorites, although I love all sorts of water. So what are we seeing? What do people like? Do you like the pool? You guys got so much ocean there, but I know you aren't right on the ocean there. Everybody's quiet. What do you like? Or shout out.
How do you cool off?
How do you cool off? Good question.
Stay hydrated and
stay hydrated. Drink the pool. Drink the pool water.
A lot of beach and a pool.
Yes, I'm closest to a pool because I have one at my condo, so a pool and cold water. But if I'm near a beach, I don't mind.
Nice.
Right. Pool and the beach. Somebody said Babbling Brook once. I like streams.
Sitting in an inner tube in a pool with my wife cleans, which my wife cleans the house.
I hope she's not on this call or have any friends who's going to fill her in on that. Okay, we got somebody going to Hawaii. I'm with you there. There's beautiful beaches in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Beautiful beaches in California. Okay. All right. Well, hopefully that got everybody to think about being cool, even if you didn't share what your preference is. You can always put it in later if you can't type, because they also know sometimes you guys might be driving or you're working on a cell phone, so it might be hard to type in the chat, but you can always shout out. Remember that. Okay, so what are we doing today? We didn't just come to talk about the beach, but we could talk about the beach for 2 hours, but you guys have things to do, people who need you, and we're trying to give you some information that'll help you, feel better equipped to do your job. So we're going to do some reminders and a recap of last session, just to, like I said, connect you back to last week. And today we're going to take a deeper dive on the phases of CTI. So we talked at the end of last session about pre-CTI. That's all the work that happens before the person moves into housing. And phase 1 starts the day they move into housing. So we are going to go through phase 1, phase 2, and 3. What are the tasks? What does it mean in each of those phases? What are we trying to do with folks? And we have breakouts and case discussions interspersed for each phase. It's 3 breakouts for 1 session, and I know that can be tough. So if we don't get to the last breakout, don't fear. We will do it, pick up with it at the beginning of our next session, and then we'll wrap it up for the day because we have 2 more sessions to go. So, what did we talk about last week? Those people from New York, what were they yapping about? We talked about assessment. We picked up on assessment because that's such a core feature of CTI, is really being focused in our assessment and in our service planning with people, in our housing stabilization planning. We talked about really understanding housing and homeless history so we could do prevention work with people so that the same thing doesn't happen again that caused them to lose their housing, or the same thing doesn't happen again that made them unhappy in their housing or whatever. And then creating a plan that does have a housing goal, but also has only 3 goals in it, right? We're trying not to overwhelm people. And hopefully if they're in treatment with someone else, therapy, there's other case managers in their lives, we can even coordinate so that they don't overwhelm the person with a lot of other goals. That's a basic CTI tenet. We also talked about the so that principle in goal setting. And I think you guys like that because we had a breakout and really digging deeper into when someone says they have a goal, I'm going to eat healthy. That's my goal, and eat healthy. You know, to delve a little more to understand the motivations behind it, the reasons for it, what it means to them, and that it's not just a goal to have a goal, or a goal because they don't know what to say, or a goal because it sounds great, you know, to eat healthy, but what does that mean? Really breaking it down for them and also making sure it's meaningful. So that, why do you want to do that? So that I can do that. So we talked about that. And then we moved into the network of care, because another big part of CTI is helping people have a network of care, having emergency contacts, having people to call when they're happy, having resources for their kids, having therapy, having fun, having friends, having a life. And we shared a tool, a fillable form called the tenant resource list. And you guys talked about that. A lot of you thought that could be helpful. And then we talked about and then let me just say something about the resource list. The resource list goes through all the same domains you're going through in the assessment to identify what connections does a person have, what connections do they need, what connections may they want, right? And really is meant to be a tool to guide your work together to help build that network of care. And then we moved into pre-CTI and warm handoffs, because you guys are, a lot of you, some of you seem to be working with people while they're in shelter or they're unsheltered. Some of you are starting with people right when they're housed, or when they're starting to look maybe for an apartment. Sounds like it's a little bit of a mix in this group, but anybody can fill in the chat box if they want to say where they connect with people. But we really focused on what's the connection between the work that gets done while people are homeless with you guys, with the rapid rehousing workers. And it may be your team, it may be your agency that you're doing warm handoffs with. It may be you doing pre-CTI, which is great because you can do a warm handoff to yourself, which is the easiest warm handoff to make most of the time, unless you have multiple personality disorder, I guess. But that's a really critical piece of the work, is really bridging that relationship, because we hear from a lot of rapid rehousing workers that people don't want to see them. They're like, okay, I'll take the money, but I'm not really interested in the case management, right? And building that bridge and helping the person connect you to what they need and want, which is housing stability, and really bridging those relationships. And then we had some conversations about that. So does that sound familiar? Are you guys in the right training? Were you all, does that sound like what we talked about last week? I see a few smiles.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, I'm seeing a couple of people typing. Yes, good. That's good. That sounds familiar. Couple of thumbs up. Thank you very much. We know you're there. Great. So we're just going to do a couple polls also to kind of, connect a little bit with those materials. So
You want me to
first-
launch it?
I got it.
Okay.
The first poll is tenant resource list. Are you interested in using or adapting the tenant resource list in your work or in your program? Yes, no, not sure. So if you've had to move away from your desk for a minute, come back and give us your responses in the poll so we can see how how that appeals to you guys as a tool. I mean, I really think now for some people who, especially if you're working with folks who are online and have a drive, like use Google Drive, you can have a nice shared Google Doc too. I know a lot of the people that you're working with are not really there. So, you know, you obviously have to tailor it. Some people are going to need a hard copy and paper and in a recording file. Okay, great. Well, 18 of 20 people have responded. So about 89, almost 90% of you are interested in using it, and a couple are not sure, maybe thinking about it, which is sorry, meant to share the results, which is great. I think it can really help frame those conversations, normalize talk about therapy and treatment, really get people to think about what the gaps are in their life that they'd like to fill. Okay, so we got one more poll just to get those fingers warmed up there and pressing the buttons, because we're going to have some breakout buttons to press. Is will you be implementing, or are you thinking about implementing any tendency skills training in your program or your work? Here I get a little more creative. Yes, no, not sure, thinking about it. So we highlighted this, and we're going to talk more about this through the phases today and next week when we talk about landlords, about how critical that is and how that can be something that people can really engage around, is tenancy skills. Okay, we have about 16, so I'll end the poll and share the results. It can be a real way to engage people, is teaching tenancy skills. That's something that's not, doesn't feel pathologizing people, you know, it can be, and it can be fun. In our programs, we often ran a series of classes. So you can see it's popular. 11 of 16 will be doing something, 69%. A couple of you not sure, 13%, and 3 of you thinking about it. And that's great. And, you know, it doesn't have to be one-on-one with people. It can be in groups, or you can have a specialist on your staff who does that, or connect with legal aid. You know, there's lots of different ways to try and get that done. Seeing something in the chat here. Yes, JC, it's important to implement. We can house folks. It's helping them keep their housing is key. Yes, it keeps the focus.
Exactly right.
It also keeps the focus to your work, right? Why are you my case manager or service coordinator or whatever? Why are you meeting with me every month? To help me become stable and help you achieve your goals too, right? And that's the other thing. What's next after housing? So last time was all about goals. And now we're going to be moving into the phases. And you've seen this slide before, so it should look familiar. Is that these are the phases of CTI, and we ended last session on pre-CTI, and Andrea's going to pick up on phase 1. Phase 1 starts the day the person moves into their new home. That's when you start the clock. And generally in CTI, the phases are timed. You would, for your rapid rehousing, you guys have to look at your length of stay, whether you're 6 months or 9 months. It can be 3 2-month phases or 3 3-month phases, but you want to pick a lane and you want to use time, right? Because people, this is about having progress with people, that they go from one phase to the other. Most rapid rehousing projects are trying to be done in 6 months with people. I don't know what your goals are. If anybody wants to pop that into the chat, that would be great. How long people are staying with you, or how long they're supposed to be staying with you. I don't know off the top of my head. But anyway, the phases are timed. So they should kind of line up with the time of intervention. And so people know that they started phase 1 September 7th, because I just moved into my house today, and phase 2 starts November 7th. And, you know, maybe because you couldn't meet that week or whatever, you start the phase date slightly changed, but the time continues, and people also keep moving forward in the phases. They never get left back. They never get sent back to 0, to pre-CTI. They may be in phase 2. Phase 1 is the first couple months in housing. They might have been stabilized and doing great. They get to phase 2, and they might have had, you know, lost a job, you know, car breakdown, had some maybe mental health challenges, stuff with the kids. So we may need to amp up our frequency, even though we're trying to step down a little bit, but they stay in phase 2. So that's a really important sort of just key concepts around the phases. They're timed, And generally people move through them in that timing. We let them know this is a partnership with clients, that we're doing CTI with them, and they are moving through the phases so they can feel a sense of accomplishment too. I don't think we've mentioned this yet with this crowd, but some people do give certificates to participants when they finish the CTI intervention. So it's, recognition, which everyone needs, and most of our folks don't get enough of. All right, I've been talking too long, given how much we have to do, so I'm going to pass the baton to Andrea.
Thanks, Suzanne. So let's talk a little bit about phase one and talk about what some of the critical tasks are. So in phase one of the things that you're going to do is really assist people to build on those linkages they made in pre-CTI and develop new linkages that are appropriate to housing, because things change once people are in housing. So we're going to be meeting with the person and the resources. And Suzanne talked a lot about, when she was doing resources, about how important it is to go with people and help them manage the system and help them learn some of those, or acknowledge some of the self-advocacy skills that they already have. So we're going to be talking to these resources. We're also going to be telling these resources we're going to check in with them. And that definitely includes the landlord. Because the last thing you want is, and we used this example last time, is that, I would say to my clients, so how's it going with your psychiatrist? Good. But then I find out that they haven't been there in 3 months. Well, okay, that might be their definition of good, but it's not mine. So let's figure it out. Let's reroute them. It may not be working for them, but it's a chance to look at that. So we want to check in with these resources and make sure that people are going and that they're taking advantage of it and that they're not problems in the relationship. Then we're going to really take a look at the new needs, right? We got to re-engage people, because as Suzanne said, a lot of people drop their case managers like a hot potato once they get into housing. And it's for a good reason. People think, well, I achieved my goal, I got housing, and why do I need you? Well, that might have been what the focus was in pre-CTI, but the focus here is really, as JC said, sustaining the housing and to continue some of the things that they started in pre-CTI. So we're going to re-engage them after the warm handoff. We're going to, review the assessment. We're going to revise the plan. It is great if they come in with a housing plan and that they've already talked about this. Some people will, some people won't. You might have developed a plan at intake, and we're going to take a look at that plan within about 2 weeks of move-in, because things change. And then we're going to identify resources needed, and that changes too. All of a sudden in the shelter, there was a place where their kids could play. They had other people to play with. There was some daycare available. Now they need these new resources. So we're going to identify the resources they need in their new reality. And we're going to focus on community support, role, and activity. And we're going to really reinforce those roles, because that's one thing that changes dramatically after people leave the shelter, is they're no longer shelter residents, now they're tenants. And that these connections in the community also give them roles. And a lot of times jobs give them roles. So we're going to really focus on those roles. And we're going to really
Andrea,
focus
there's
on
a comment in the chat about
Great.
that COVID impacted the resources. You're talking about what are the resources that people need,
Yeah.
and that there's been a shift in resources. Some things went away, some things are way backed up. Yes, and a lot of resources and just availability of accessing them comfortably is also a problem. You're still wearing a mask in some places and don't want to maybe go to the clinic because there's a lot of people there who are sick, things like that. And then we still have COVID happening too, right? At the same time.
Yep. And it's scary. And we've got to help people get those resources to help deal with COVID, right? Everything from PPEs to, to counseling to, vaccines, but we also want to talk to our team, because as things change rapidly, team members might have had an experience with a resource so they can tell you about it. One of the things that we really recommend is part of the team meeting. The other thing is ask the clients what their experience in the resource is and how it's changed. So you can both problem solve with them, but so you also have that resource in your pocket for the next person. It's going to be tough. And some of the things are still virtual, which is a real problem for a lot of the people we serve. and we may need a non-virtual resource. So it's all about talking to people about how to use those resources and what good experiences people have had. So absolutely true. We want to revise the plan to reflect being in housing because, as we said, things change. Their priorities might change. Their immediate needs might change. You know, in the shelter, people rarely complain about being lonely, but in housing, they complain about it all the time. So how to set up those community supports. That's why we're really focused on sort of the things. The other thing is that we need to think about, Suzanne mentioned fun, and I don't want to downgrade fun. I think it's one of the most important things. If people don't have a good time in their housing, they're not going to connect to their housing. So we want to really think about what are the things that give them comfort, give them purpose, and give them a little bit of enjoyment. And we're going to talk to people about that. We're also going to do some skill development. We're going to provide education about rights. The tenancy skills come in there. The rights and responsibilities and how to negotiate with resources comes in there. We're going to talk about expectations, and we're going to model negotiation skills. And the best way to do that is to accompany people and think about it. We're also going to do a little bit of talking about how to develop these resources. So let's go to the next one and we'll get to that. Okay. So part of the worker's role is to articulate your role. Yes, they have heard this before, but repetition really bears out. The other thing is people may have questions, and the questions may be different than they asked when they first came in. And we're going to try to acclimate people to the neighborhood, and we're going to think about who best on our team is best to do this. Sometimes peer support can do a really good job. We've also had some really good effects of people who provide substance abuse treatment and care going around the neighborhood with people, identifying triggers, identifying problem solving about what they can do. Like when they go to the local convenience store, there's people lined up outside all drinking beer. Is that going to be hard for you? Is there another time you can go? We're going to have those conversations. We're also going to assist people to set up their apartment, and having resources for things like furniture is going to be really important here. It's hard for people to connect to their housing unless they have something in there that makes them comfortable. We're going to see people at least weekly. This is the most intensive phase. And as we mentioned in the first session, this is double. People count double. And the reason for that is because we see them more frequently. We may see them more than once weekly. It depends on their need. This is a really critical phase to stabilize people in that unit. We're going to have frequent contact with services. The recommendation is at least once a month. There's supports, which is really important, which is not something that I initially focused on, which I found to be really important in the long run. And also with that housing provider, because we're going to monitor the structure. We're going to monitor how they're functioning as a tenant. And we're going to schedule these regular check-ins. We're going to develop a plan to access resources. We're going to always accompany people to them. And we're going to talk to people about how housing is working for them. Sometimes the housing isn't working for them, or they're not connecting to the housing, and then their motivation to keep the housing is decreased. So one of the things we want to do is talk about what's working and what's not working. So an example of that is I'm really lonely. So we want to figure out what they did before. That comes from the assessment of where they were in shelters, what they did all day. And we're going to try to replace some of those things. They had a card game with the other guys at the shelter. Maybe they could, think about getting a card game going in their housing, or a card game going with some friends that have also graduated. There were people to watch their kids in the shelter. How can we figure that out with family members or friends? We're going to focus on role, purpose, connections, and activity. People have to have something to do during the week. What happens is that if people don't have enough to do, they're going to churn, and they're going to, which can make symptoms worse. They're also going to do things like revert to the behaviors that were in the shelter, which may not be productive in housing. So we're going to help them develop activities that they look forward to every week. as part of this and what their role is in the activity, which provides a little bit of structure. And then we're going to always monitor lease compliance. So we're talking to those landlords on a regular basis. Yes, we're asking them to call us if there are any problems, but we're not waiting for that. You know, it may seem minor, but if we can get a minor problem taken care of early, that'll really help people maintain tenancy. So we're going to check in with that landlord on a regular basis and at least monthly. Okay. So part of how we're going to do this is we're going to spend some real time on skill building, and negotiating skills are a pretty advanced skill, and we're going to help people do that. Their technique for negotiating skills, I don't know, I had plenty of people I worked with who, because the social service system is oriented towards crisis, the way that they got services is to scream and make everything a crisis. Well, that really doesn't work as well in housing. So how else can we do this? So we're going to focus on people's rights and responsibilities. So, you know, what do they have a right to? You know, landlords can't enter their apartment unless they give them at least 24-hour notice, or there's a property management emergency. We're going to talk about those sorts of things. So this is where tenants' rights come in. And also, as we're doing the resource list, we're going to talk to people about patient rights. We're going to talk to people about members of community rights. And we're going to model for people how to maximize those rights and how to negotiate for services. And maybe as simple as getting past the front desk at a clinic, or it may be, how do you join a faith community? And how do you negotiate that? And what do you want out of this? And how are we going to get what we need out of this? We're going to try it out with people and we're going to debrief it. Sometimes they need to watch us. So it's a mentoring process, but we're going to debrief it and ask them what they're comfortable doing themselves. We're also going to observe people and really point out the skills that they have so they can maximize those skills. We're going to continue to check in with the resource to make sure that that connection is solid and that people are getting what they need. And then we're going to review costs and benefits of continuing with that service or using that service. And that's a part of critical thinking, which is something that we really want to teach people, but it also prevents that walk away thing. If people don't feel like they're going to get any services, they'll walk away from a service when they hit a bump in the road. And we want to teach people how to renegotiate for those services. We're also going to talk to them about how to acknowledge strong partners. Could be as simple as we gave people a box of thank you notes and they used to send them a lot to the people. Truth, huh? We, okay. Yeah, it's fine if you don't have your camera on. I know it's low bandwidth. So that one, sorry, I was just reading the chat. So one of the things that we're going to do is we gave people a thank you note and they wrote them to the receptionist at the clinic. And what the result of that was is they got a lot more attention and positive attention. And people were surprised by that. And as we say, you draw a lot more flies with honey rather than vinegar. Let's teach people a little bit of things that don't cost them anything, but can really acknowledge good partners and how that really strengthens the partnership with people that are served by them. We're going to renegotiate relationships if possible. We want to teach people that if something doesn't work out, I'll give you an example. We had a guy who we took a long time to get into a cardiologist. He had some heart problems. First visit, the cardiologist gives him a big lecture on drinking and smoking. And he says, I'm never going back there. I don't need a cardiologist. Well, okay. So what can you do in that situation? Maybe you can talk to the cardiologist. You can monitor some negotiating skills. Maybe they need another cardiologist, but it doesn't mean you won't get this service. It means that the service will be in another form. So it may be another provider. It may be talking to the provider about what works. Yes, explore pros and cons with a partner. You're going to do some reality testing. You're going to help people do that. Yeah. Part of it is most cardiologists will give a lecture. Maybe we can negotiate it down to 5 minutes, but that might help people be more comfortable. And it also makes them feel in control of the relationship. And the relationship is more of a partnership instead of one person being in control. So it's been very helpful to people. Are these techniques that you use now? Skill building techniques? Yeah, no. Okay.
Yes.
Basically, what, yeah, great. Love the idea of thank you cards from clients. I used to bring chocolates to the front desk. Yep. We all have these. Yep. And helpful for both me and my clients. Yes. And these staff remembered this and they'll always be helpful in the future. That's exactly right. We want lifestyle changes more than partners. It takes a while for folks to transition. It doesn't happen overnight. I'm not sure what you meant. You want people to stop smoking and drinking? Yes, eventually. But in the meantime, we do want them to get the service, right? So that's where we're at with a cardiologist. That's where he may need, please, he will mention that because that's part of his job, and that the lifestyle changes will ultimately be necessary. But in the meantime, there are things that they can do to relieve some suffering. So we want to be careful.
I think that what JC might have meant, and JC, feel free to
Okay.
unmute yourself and talk,
Yeah,
is that the other resources don't want it as much as they want it when they're working with one of their clients,
Right.
that, you know,
Right.
they're more
So
involved. Is that?
thank you for the clarification, Suzanne, because we have a partner right now where everybody wants everything, what's the best for him, but he's so stuck in his, and it's not by choice, this is all he knows. He's stuck in his substance, but he's functioning. He's functioning in his substance. We just housed him. But we're afraid that if he, yes, he just got housed, a person that had a very, very difficult time with other
Great.
programs and agencies, and this was it for him. This was it for him. And we always want the best for our partners and our outcomes, right? Because agencies and programs are outcome driven, and we also want a positive outcome for our partners. But sometimes what I'm saying is it takes a while for them to transition. Some of them are
Absolutely.
comfortable in their homelessness, believe it or not.
Yes,
Believe it
of
or
course.
not.
Yeah.
Well, it's known.
Especially in this
Remember,
county.
we talked about transitions. There's a lot of transitions, right?
Yeah.
And so people are more comfortable with what they know. It takes a while for people to change, absolutely. You know, and for building motivation, takes a while.
And to help people make that change, that's why one of our focus is on from crisis to planning, right? You're a lot less likely to get the long-term things that you want if you do it at a one-shot deal. So that we want to move from crisis to planning, and planning is the enemy of crisis. And even if we get people to, talk about something for 15 minutes before they move, that'll fight the impulsivity and the crisis orientation. And the people have got to have a good experience of negotiating something in a non-crisis manner, and then people will try other techniques. We want to broaden out their techniques, which I think is something that JC was saying. We also want to teach people critical thinking using strategies, resources that includes prioritization. What works best for each person. And we want to help people develop a structure and a purpose and a role in their days so that they have something to look forward to, and also so that they understand their roles. And those bring expectations, which help people organized. So we want to really focus on the new and changed roles in their life, from homelessness to tenant, to family member. Their relationship with their family members is going to change when they're housed and when they're homeless. To being a student, to being a worker, to being an advocate, to being an artist, anything that people identify them as, we want to really pay attention to those roles and help people fully assume roles, which will provide them with a structure and also provide them with a functional barometer to see if they're moving in the right direction. Yeah. Yeah, people are pounded to the ground, it's true. And they don't have a lot of great expectations. And that's one of the reasons why it's so important to mentor people and let people try, right? Because,
And point out how successful people have been.
Yes.
Right? Because in spite of what people have had in front of them, they're here today with you, getting housing, moving forward, right? And really recognizing those strengths and providing opportunities for them to feel successful. In some ways, CTI is really about that. It's really about helping people feel connected and having a chance to be successful and move forward in their lives. And that hope seeds hope. And you guys know that, when people do one thing, then they think they can do another thing. and another and another and another. And that's part of motivational interviewing, about building confidence and a sense of competence, you know, but it definitely takes time, especially for people. I know you have a real variety of people that you're working with, but especially for people who've been homeless for a long time, it really is, some people it's not the same, but it really is difficult.
Yeah, and we're teaching a lot of these new skills, and we're teaching a lot of these in a different way that people have experienced before. And that's why people have a little extra time in the first phase too. Because it's hard, it's a lot of work. Okay. So we're gonna do a breakout session on phase 1, and we're gonna put them in the chat. And you're
So are
gonna.
you gonna do that now while or do you want me to, I can,
Yes.
wait, I want to put you in the PDF will be easier.
Okay, I can do that if you want.
Okay, because I'll set up the breakouts and I'll read tell people what's gonna happen.
Okay.
Okay, so one thing that we did do was attach to your appointment with you the slides, the breakout conversations, because we have case studies today. But we're also popping them in the chat. So there it is. Thank you, Andrea.
Welcome.
This first one doesn't have long case studies, but the second and third do. But this is the file that has all of the breakouts that we'll be hopefully doing today. So, you know, I think you know each other, but okay, you want to set it up now that you're ready, and I'll do the
Sure.
mechanics. Yeah.
So this will be slightly different. So you're going to introduce yourself to the people in the room, and you're going to think about and talk about people you were working with who are in housing for less than 2 months, or if you're doing a 3-month phase 1 in less than 3 months. And what are you seeing, right? What are you seeing that's making problems for them to maintain housing, that's creating barriers? And it might be lease violations. It might be other things that you're looking at as brewing crisis. They might not have gotten a release violation yet, but what are they doing to create those problems? And then what successes have you seen addressing the things that people struggle with when they first come into housing? And then what types of supports or interventions have been the most helpful? And it could be you, it could be your resource, could be peer support, it could be, you know, other people in the building. What's been helpful for people to make that transition and address those issues that might interfere with them maintaining tenancy long term? So Suzanne's going to break you up in breakouts.
Yep, I'm ready to open the rooms.
Great.
So I think you all know, because we've done this before, you got to actively join a room. You can
Yeah.
always come back to the main room and visit us. And I know some of you won't be able to join the breakouts, and we'll check in with you to make sure there's no technical issue, but we do get that, and you could just hang in the main room. But I know your colleagues want to hear from each other, so.
And it's 10
All right,
minutes.
10 minutes.
Here we go.
I'm going to pause recording. Okay, resume recording.
So welcome back. So what kind of bumps are you seeing? What kind of behaviors are creating these barriers?
One of my barriers that I have with a client is that they just smoking compliance, complying to the rules and regulations of their housing unit. And they had been warned several times, and I was told by the property manager about the client. So I went to the client and was working with the client, which was a little challenge, but they understood because you want to keep your housing, and they were compliant to know that they have to go down, they have to leave their unit and smoke outside their unit.
It's a hard thing to teach people, and that's a great example, because smoking is something that if you're homeless, you can do it anywhere, right?
Right. And
Well,
so,
almost anywhere.
well, almost anywhere, because not every place, like in Hayward, some parts of Concord, you can't smoke outside.
Yep.
So knowing that, they was in compliance. Excuse me. They were in compliance, and they worked with that. Now that they get a hang of going outside, the smoking due to not losing their housing. And which is a good thing in that, and I'm happy for that, because don't nobody want to lose their housing for not following rules, because everything is not, it can't be just no rules.
So it tells me a couple of things. So tell me if I'm right, is that they're consistently with the property management reinforcing the structure, which is you can't smoke in your unit. You're explaining to people the reason why, because it's the law, right?
Yes,
And it's also clean air for people. And then you're giving people alternatives to try something else, which is smoking outside and providing a smoking area. So that's a big success.
yes, and they now she's talking about working on quitting. And I said, well, that's a
That's a great thing.
Yes, because I mean, if you can quit, that's a good thing, because it saves a lot of money in your pocket.
Money, yeah, it's
And
expensive.
coming from her, that's a great intervention.
Especially a person that's been smoking for over 30, 40 years.
Yeah, I can relate.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great thing. That was a great example.
Thank you.
Anybody else hitting barriers? Thank you.
Lashandria had her hand up. Yep.
Well,
Yeah,
I've heard of-
being responsible. A lot of times coming off the streets and being housed, when you're on the streets, you don't have to be responsible. No paying bills, no buying food, no just taking care of yourself. So the barriers that I run into is trying to get people used to being responsible, paying your bills on time, making sure you eat, you have your own house, you can cook when you want, as much as you want. You can go buy your own food. So like I said, just being responsible, because when you're on the street, you don't have to be too much responsible for anything, because there's places you can go to eat, there's places you can go and take a shower. You can have your mail going to different places, if you have any mail. So it's a struggle for some people to become responsible.
It is. And people who are homeless are responsible for figuring out the soup kitchen thing and figuring out like when to take a shower and stuff like that. And that those often have a structure, so that those are positive things, but it is really hard to make a transition to paying bills and, organizing paying bills, which is a real challenge for people. And what have you done to help people do that? Have you talked to them about it? Have you set up any systems? Have you tried anything?
Yeah, for me, I have. I've even went out with some of my clients that is not familiar with the portal, because a lot of apartments now, you don't bring a money order or a check or anything is changed to the portal. So I've even went out with some of my clients and walked them through going and paying a rent on the portal. I had a client who rent was separate from his sewer and garbage. So it was two different parts to it. And so I had to go out there and actually walk him to the office, how to knock on the window, what to ask for, let him know when that was due. It was due on a different date than a rent. So for me, I will go out there, and if I have to literally walk it through you like we're paying your rent that day, that is what I do, because some people is not computer savvy. So if you can't use the computer, who do you helping you? Can I talk to them, or can they talk to me? Let's see what we can come together and see if they're able to help you, because some of the people I'm housing are older people. They know nothing about a computer at all.
Yeah.
Right.
So you're using techniques of mentoring. Is really important, figuring out what they can do. And you're also doing a lot of resource development, like who can help you with this, right?
Well, and walking people through those things is
Really
so critical, like sitting with them at the computer, helping them find the portal. I know I could use that help a little bit more.
Me too.
I know I went to that website once, but I can't remember what was my login, where was it? How do you bookmark it, right? Those things. So people, it's a perfect example of what we were talking about really working a resource with a person to see how they do. Because you're going to see how they are doing on the computer. Are they literate or not at all? Did they get frustrated quickly? Like my mother used to, no, I know what to do. Or were they able to listen and hear you and try some new things? And, you learn a lot about how they manage resources when you're really working alongside of someone like that. And people do need help with that because the world has
Yep.
changed a lot. And it sounds like you're working with people who've been homeless for a long time. And a lot of things have changed a lot in the last, few years and then with COVID layered on top, that's even changed things further, in terms of new procedures. So that really walking alongside a person is great.
Yep. And it's complicated. That was a great example. Anybody else want to give an example?
I'm going to tag team with Marjorie from Hope Solutions. I was with Marjorie, Alicia, Felix, and Marina, and they all gave some really great feedback that I felt their pain in when they were when they were giving a narrative about their partner. I'm like, oh my God, we are all sharing the same thought, but we worked towards a solution on Marjorie, check me if I'm missing anything, okay? Like revisiting the lease with them on their expectations, reminding them that they don't have to build these extra apparatuses in their unit, that this is all theirs, taking pride in their unit. And just reminding them that this is yours, but however, here are the expectations for your lease while you live here, like the recycling and the hoarding. The success that we've seen is just really walking them through the processes. Marina brought up a good point about one mutual participant that they're finding everything wrong with their unit. And I'm going to be 100 with you. Not all of these landlords are.
Sure.
Some of them do need that truth to the expectations of you being a landlord. So walking them through that process as well and holding them accountable. And then the types of supports and interventions that have been most helpful is just walking the partner through what their rights are as a participant tenant, helping them understand the terms of their lease, but also reminding them that these are the expectations of you. Is there a fire? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, you guys.
I hope there's no fire.
I hope there's no fire.
There's this loud thing in the background. The types of supports and interventions that have been most helpful. Alicia brought up a good point about a lot of our client partners that missed a lot of their appointments because they were high from the night before, or they're just,
Sure.
I'm just keeping it 100 here with some stuff that we really experience. I like to use scenarios. And I was sharing with Alicia, she brought up something that just totally reminded us of this one partner where my staff had to literally get in the car and find him at the park. He would come up missing all the time, and he had to sign his lease that very day. And just, so we were talking about, like, I'm just kind of old school. I like to see it in front of me. I'm 55 plus. So I was like, buy your client a calendar, a big one, and put on the wall. So when they see it in red, oh shoot, I need to be here, or helping them set reminders on their phones. But
those are great techniques. Those are really wonderful techniques because it helps people to organize.
Yes, right? Use the keyword organize. But the success is also is that collaborating with the agencies that have housed this one individual, because sometimes it's not just one agency. Like we work closely with Hope Solutions and with Trinity and with CORE, and so like that tag teaming on building that alliance to really support them in their sustainability is really key too. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Those resources, those are great things.
Well, and you guys are giving perfect examples of how to structure.
Yep.
We keep banging a drum about structure, routine, and activities, and how helping people build a life, connecting them to the internet, getting them a calendar. When you're living unsheltered, or you're even in the shelter, do you have your own calendar? Or are you the person who's going to keep it on your phone? Or is this somebody who needs paper, right? JC wants to see it on paper, big red letters. Don't forget to call JC.
We use our calendars on our laptops and we use our phones, but not everybody has that capability. Some of them are seniors.
And some people want to see paper, and that's, that's how they are. My sister writes her schedule on 3 calendars, literally. And her schedule changes every week for work. I don't know, but she's been doing it 30 years now. She's not going to change. She's not using a phone calendar, but that's also what's really come through is how individualized you are. Because CTI is kind of an interesting blend where it is a manualized intervention and there's things to do in each phase, but it's also really individualized to the person's needs and trying to provide what assistance they might need that somebody else might not. I think we need to roll a little bit,
Yep,
Andrea.
yep, we
so-
do. Okay. So let's talk about phase two. So people have come to the end of phase two, and phase one doesn't end necessarily when you've accomplished all the tasks. It's really based on time. It's a little bit counterintuitive, it was to me, but the time really has an effect on it. So we're going to promote people to the next phase, and the next phase is we see people a little less. And the reason for that is so that people can pick up some of the things that we've been working on in phase one, and we want to see how they do in doing them independently. Can they keep up that calendar, or do they still need somebody to fill out that calendar? It's perfectly okay if you're filling out that still filling out that calendar in phase two, but we're really aware that we're trying to teach people how to do that. So we're also solidifying those community linkages, and we're making sure they're working for them. And I call this the phase where we're pulling on those linkages. Let's make sure they're showing up. Let's make sure the people are using them. Let's make sure that all people's rights are respected. Let's make sure that they have a good communication structure, and so do we. And then we're going to look at higher level things: legal assistance, schools for children, religious, spiritual communities, treatment, support options. Are those, those may not have been a priority in the first phase, but as they become more of a priority, like you talked about, the woman now wants to quit smoking. She may need some support to do that, and that's coming up as a natural progression. So we're going to make those linkages as we move on. We're also going to promote those living and tenancy skills. We're going to really recognize people when they're able to use that portal, when they are, separating out their garbage and the landlord is given up on that. We're going to make sure their income is in place. We're going to really focus on financial management at this point, and tenancy obligations and options to address tenancy breaches. And we're going to really focus on schedule and role. And Suzanne said we're really banging that drum about structure, because structure, as the structure takes hold, there's less need for consequences. And we want to get away from that consequence thing, which is externally driven, and go to structure, which is internally driven and people can take with them. We're going to, make sure that we're communicating with those support systems. We're going to make sure that they're working. And that includes the spiritual, that includes the family, that includes everybody. Let's just make sure those are working. And then we're going to develop that longer term plan. So we're going to start focusing people on non-immediate needs, which all the work you've done on getting people to be less impulsive, less reactive, more critical thinking is going to pay off in this phase. And we're going to look at things like educational planning and help people make longer term plans. And longer term plans for a home. This is where it comes up. I know you want to live with your girlfriend or your boyfriend. How can we do that? And how can we work on that? If needed or wanted, increase text, email, phone calls, and that sort of stuff. Yeah, we're using other techniques and seeing how people respond to those. We're going to always focus on that hope and what people want and how people are going to get those things to keep up people's motivations. So, but we're also going to focus on competency and what they're good at. And we're going to focus on, in this second phase, is taking a skill that they've used for one situation and applying it to another, which is very hard. And we're going to always try to increase people's, competency. We're going to work on confidence. We're going to work on feelings of competency. We're going to work on hope. And we're going to help people build those things through these techniques. Okay, let's go to the next one. We mentioned we're going to see people at least bi-weekly. I know there's some people that you're going to see more frequently than once a week in the first phase. If you're seeing people daily or 3 times a week, you probably don't want to step them down to once every 2 weeks, but you might see them once every week. It's important that a step down occurs and that people get to try out some things and report back to you.
I think R. Weiss goes by the name Robert, but I'm not sure. You can let me know.
That's your name.
made a comment about if needed or wanted, increase text, emails, phone
Yeah.
calls when you decrease face-to-face, right? That's a way to
Right.
step down, right? Not as much
Yeah.
intensive one-on-one connection with people.
Yep. That's a good point. We're still going to meet monthly with services, supports, and the housing provider, and that's really critical. And we're shifting towards resources. We're shifting towards people using this network of care. So that communication is really important. We want to figure out if these resources are working for people. Doesn't matter if people have them on paper, if they're not using them or they're not participating, that's problematic. I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but I had a guy and we practiced in phase 1 and phase 2. He was going to a psychiatrist and I went with him one time and he gets out of there after we practiced. He was having some side effects from his medication. He was going to talk about it. He said not a word about it. And he got out of the meeting and said, here, you take this prescription because I'm sure not filling it. And I thought, okay, this is not working, right? So let's figure out how we can make this work, how he can really negotiate with the psychiatrist to get a medication that he feels like is working for him. So we had to backtrack a little bit. That's fine in phase 2. You're going to see these bumps. And we're going to really focus on those. We're going to focus on those longer term supports, the ones that will sustain people after they've been in CTI and services, and we're going to always recognize progress, and we're going to reframe setbacks. Okay, so this psychiatric appointment's not really working for you, so let's figure out how we can make it better. Or let's figure out how we can get you another psychiatric appointment. Let's figure out what you're looking for in the psychiatric appointment. It's fine to switch resources at this phase. In fact, it's necessary often to switch resources. The most important thing is that people don't disengage with a service altogether, but they realize that this might be a specific service problem. Does that make sense? We're trying to prevent people from walking away. Okay. So the other thing that we're going to do is we're going to recognize this progress and we're going to redo the assessment, not redo the assessment. We're going to update the assessment and we're going to update the plan. And in order to do that, we want to recognize people's progress. And you saw in the model plan, there's a point where you can recognize progress and you can put it in writing. People really like that. You know, it's so rare that the people we serve get that kind of positive feedback. Usually it's just move on to the next problem. And we want to take some time to really recognize what people have been able to do because we want them to take those skills and apply it to something else. And we want to build up their confidence. We want to redefine setbacks. Okay, this is not working for you. Let's figure out what the problem is and let's figure out what we can do to do something about it. And we also want to fill in missing pieces from the past assessment, and there will be missing pieces because people don't tell people everything on the first shot. So that as people update us, as people open up a little bit more, the assessments are going to get deeper, and we just want some sort of mechanism to update those. We're also going to update the plan, and we're going to review what worked. We're going to reframe what didn't work. And we're going to really talk about the missing pieces because people's priorities might change at this point. And we're going to update the goals discussion. What's their importance? What's the priority? Do they feel like they've accomplished that? What are the new goals? And goals are really important because they provide people with a structure to move forward. And we're going to do all of that as we move into phase 2. Say it again. Delisha, did you?
Someone.
I thought you wanted to say something. Okay.
I think it was someone's unmuted.
Okay. At this point, the tenant's network of care should be providing a lot of the services. It makes it possible for us to step back, but it also makes it possible for people to practice with that network of care that's going to follow them after CTI. So as I said, we want to make sure those connections are working. We want to really focus on employment programs, particularly with rapid rehousing. Employment programs and supplementing their income and increasing their income is a bigger and bigger priority as they realize how expensive it is to live in housing. You want to have that goal provide the structure And you want to make sure that people are really participating in the planning process by really, really going deep on those goals and really going deep on getting people to tell us a story about when they've been successful and what they see their skills as and how they can apply those skills to the next thing. So that the other part is that other members of your team may have some contact with people. They may know this person. We want to share our planning process with the team and get some input. How people are when we're not there. It's really important to have that kind of perspective because the work we do is really close in. And it's important to have other people. It can be a supervisor, it can be members of your team, but you want to get as much input as possible, especially from the person you're serving. Okay, let's go to the next one.
Sorry.
You're good. It's the breakout. Okay. So just a reminder, there's a PDF of the breakouts in your file. If you download that, you'll have it.
There's a
So you
comment on the
want-
chat, Andrea, before you go into that, and I'll give
Oh,
you some
good.
minute. Yeah.
I forgot the name of the form you showed us last week, but should be reviewed periodically and especially updated when you decrease contact. Yes, that was either
The service plan, the service plan.
Yep, that's exactly what you want to do.
The service plan and your assessment, whether or not you do a
Yep.
full assessment again, but you want to update your information that you
Yep.
have on people, and update the plan, because also the goals really need to, because it's a time limited, you know, we need to keep working those goals. I have not heard from people how long you're working with folks in rapid rehousing. In general, could people pop that in the chat? Is it like 6 months? Is it 9
9
months? Is it a year? Is it 2 years? Or shout out? I'm unable to. 6 months, okay.
Yeah, I was about to say
6 to
6 months,
18.
but it depends on the services that that the client is getting from us. Because like with EHB, they're with us for a short period of time versus the person that's getting their full service, getting our full services as far as payments, getting titrations towards their rent so they can learn how to pay their rent on their own fully financially.
Mm-hmm. If you want to think about your services and how much of these intensive services people need, some people move people in rapid rehousing if they extend them, particularly for financial, into case management as usual, as opposed to the really structured CTI. Some people have extended CTI to 9 months. So it depends on your client load. It depends on who you're serving and what makes most sense to you.
And you can still serve people after the CTI ends. So if
Absolutely.
you're worried that you planned it as 6 months and then you ended up serving this person for 9 months, that's okay. That's just going to care as usual, as we call it. You want to acknowledge for the client that the technical CTI part of the work is over, but it's not going to look that different. And it's really just care as usual, but we give clients that sense of movement. I cannot put the, I think, case in the chat just as text because I think it's too much. I know the breakouts. So hopefully everybody can access that PDF because it has all the cases. We're going to read them really fast though.
Yep.
Right, Andrea, we'll just zip through
Yep.
these. So we'll read the cases so that when you get broken up into your groups, you already had a little bit of time to think about who you'd like to discuss because we have 3 different situations here. So
Marco was doing fairly well and then he moved in a friend from the shelter. Okay. And now there are complaints from his landlord, both of having frequent guests and noise complaints. And he's having trouble paying his rent because it's more expensive when a friend is there. And he feels bad about the friend because the friend can't go back to the shelter. So when the worker tries to talk to him about it, he really pushes off the worker and tries to ghost him. And he tells him this is his buddy and he's not going to leave him out there. And he says the worker doesn't understand. So he makes some suggestions. And if this looks familiar to you, try this one. Let's go to the next one.
I think you're reading a little differently from what's on the slide. He
Yeah.
also suggests that the worker get the friend an apartment too. After all, he's homeless.
I was
could
gonna
just
leave
read
that
it
for
from
them.
the slide. Okay. I'll read it from the next one and then we'll switch off. Then there's Rosa. Rosa has 2 children, ages 2 years and 9 months old. She did well in the first few months in housing. Now she's been in housing around 3 or 4 months, and she had a job and daycare for her kids. Then the kids started getting sick. She missed a lot of work and she got fired. All her plans to move up and make a little money fell apart. She's upset and she stays home with the kids. You visited and they were all still in the pajamas in the afternoon. The house was a wreck. Her sister and her children are there visiting, and Rosa's going between tearful and angry. She tells you she knew this wouldn't work. She made minimum wage. How could she ever support the family on that? Her sister is also angry, telling her you were supposed to be helping Rosa. Instead, you made her kids sick and broke her heart. Rosa tells you the only one who's helpful is her sister. She brought her food and the kids are happy with their cousins. Landlord is decidedly not happy with the current situation and told you Rosa has 100 people living in that apartment. Now what?
Okay. So Sylvia just turned 60. She's lived in housing for 4 months. She has children who were raised by her mother and her sister, and she's been in shelters, encampments, and had a brief stay in rapid rehousing before. She was happy to get her own place, and she's begun reconnecting with her grown children. She's been doing really well. She's been paying rent, making friends in the building. She was working with a harm reduction specialist, and she decreased her drinking. She's getting consistent medical care for the first time, and she had a plan to save for a larger apartment and thinking of selling her baked goods at the farmer's market. All this has changed. She's no longer taking care of herself or a unit. She looks disheveled. She's clearly drinking a lot. She's not paid rent for 2 months and is ducking the landlord. And you try to check in with her and she starts to cry. She says she might as well just go back to the encampment. She wants you to leave her alone.
So we gave you,
Yep, go ahead.
I just want to go back to this slide, the prompts. We gave you some prompts just in case any of you are having trouble getting the document. Is what do you think of the barriers to housing stability? We're always looking at everything through that lens. What other information would you maybe try to figure out? How would you try to build the person's motivation to address the housing risks? Like, what do they want? What's important to them? And what are some of the challenges you anticipate in addressing the issue? So we're going to break you up into group, and then you have to negotiate with each other which one you're going to discuss.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a chance for you to work your negotiation skills. Are you ready, Andrea? I mean, to do it? Okay. We're all set. And just always come back to the main room if you have trouble. We had somebody kicked out before. So we'll see you in about 10 minutes and we'll give you a warning.
You want to pause the recording?
Resume.
So you guys were saying that you're doing Marco. So what did you think about that situation? JC said,
yeah, I enjoyed
somebody.
The dialogue that I'll have Randolph and Delisha. They really gave some good pointers, and actually this is a real scenario that all of us are experiencing or have experienced. So if Delisha's on here and Randolph Weiss, I'm not sure.
Robert Weiss.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
I only know his name is Robert because I heard someone call him out last week.
So what did you think? You came up with some techniques? So you came up with some to build motivation to maintain his housing?
What are the barriers to housing stability that is going on for Marco, and how are you going to build some motivation for him to address those?
I think it was Robert and Delisha talking about bringing the third person into the circle to have a real, a courageous conversation about how he's potentially compromising Marcos's housing. And then also in addition to that, not just leaving him out, but also referring him to maybe somebody like something like CORE, so that he doesn't feel left out, and, you know, connecting him to that resource, but also reminding the lease expectation and not personalizing it, because, you know, we as service providers are like, we work so hard to get you housed and this is going to mess you up. So I like when Delisha said the piece about not, you know, internalizing and personalizing it, but also, you know, shifting the paradigm and reminding them that this is compromising all the hard work that they've done to get them housed. Not us, but them.
And that's true. And he's also said, he's giving you a little clue when he says, you know, the worker should get his buddy an apartment, and that it was a great technique to send him there. And maybe Marco can help him advocate for himself, right? But that'll also reinforce the expectations of housing for Marco. You know, it's going to be hard for this guy not to move anybody in. So maybe Marco can help him with that.
And maybe this is an opportunity for people to live together. And I think one thing that we find is a lot of people are housed as singles, but they're really too lonely. And most people in America do not live alone. I see a lot of nodding heads of the heads that I see. And maybe that could be a solution, is that they could get an apartment together, and in shared housing, they could have separate leases so that it's a little cleaner with the landlord, although not all landlords want that. But even a roommate situation, you know, where they're both on the lease and then they work it out if they're really good friends. I mean, you have to worry a little bit about the dynamics between the two of them. Is there any kind of predatory behavior here or exploitive behavior? But maybe he doesn't want to live alone. And
some of them are used to congregate living too. Some of them.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes.
So in this case, if that other individual would be a potential candidate in his success because they can split the rent. But if we identify in the team decision meeting that no, this might be a person that may compromise your housing, then we would connect him to a resource outside, like maybe CORE, which does mobile outreach, to actually connect him to the same resources that Marco received. Delisha and Robert, am I missing anything?
It's Randolph. He put a note in the Randolph.
Okay, right on.
Yeah, that's what I tell my mistress. Anyway, so, you know, I'm thinking this more because I thought we had a really good discussion. For me, like the toughest part of case management is like understanding someone's behavior, but still pointing out to them reality. Like, hey, I get it, you want your buddy here, but you got a lease. You know, you signed this lease. You can't have a buddy here, but I get it. I get it. You want your friend and you feel bad for your friend. So, you know, I think that's the dance we do with a lot of our clients is, hey, I get it. You like to buy a lot of meth at the beginning of the month when you get your check, but dang, man, then you don't pay your rent. So I get it, but you know, all of us have to pay rent, man. It's just you, you know? So yeah. And if anyone has the answer to that, write a book or do a TED Talk, do a TED Talk.
I think what's important too is to understand that them wanting the friend or whoever it is also a protective factor for them, right?
Yeah.
So when you're out on the streets, you're dealing with a lot of, that's like your protective factor. So when you move in, California's rent's high. Like when you have a buddy come over and say, hey, I'm going to give you a little bit of money to help you out. Like that goes back into the protective factor, right? And remaining housed. And I think a lot of our clients get caught up in that. To where they're so used to being protected by other people. How do you break that bond with those people?
Well, and nobody's really independent. Everybody relies on other people, and a lot of people live together to save money and make it work and have companionship and not be lonely. And, you know, that is a way, and we've been hearing from more and more rapid rehousing programs, especially with single adults, that they have to live with somebody because otherwise, like your market's haywire in California, we know that. The prices, and that, you know, because the rapid rehousing is time limited, you know, over the long haul, if somebody has absolutely no money, they're not going to make it in that housing, right? If they're paying every nickel they have for rent. So buddying up with somebody could, you know, be a better economic solution and give them more money in their pocket if they did have a roommate, you know, if they did share.
And then also looking at it looking at it as a skill and not a barrier sometimes can help.
Yep.
So
Yes.
taking
Living
some
with
things
somebody
that
else. Yep.
sometimes we view things that a lot of our clients do as barriers, but if we could turn it into a skill, because really it's skillful to be able to be around another person, right? That's a
Right.
skill. So trying to turn it into a skill too, I think is important.
Yep.
Yep, having that relationship. And I liked really that's immediately where the group went, because they went to, let's involve this friend so he's a part of this. Let's see if we can help this friend, you know, and not just dismiss and say the friend has to go, right? Because then we're going to lose Marco. We're not going to have anything to talk to Marco about at all. He'll just keep shutting us out. But, you know, I think also going, you know, to what Randolph just said, and I think it's a really important point, is that is exactly the question we want the person, the client, to talk to us about. You know, I know you want to have your friends here. And I did forget to say one thing. People may not know that they can't have someone move into them with them.
Yeah.
They think it's my house, it's my couch. Why can't somebody sleep on the couch? So occupancy is a really important thing to go over with people when they're going over the lease, that you can't just move your friend in. That when I was on my first lease, I could, you know, I didn't have a piece of paper. We had a handshake. I could have moved my friend in on the couch, but you can't. And explaining why that is important. But then also, you know, how do we help you have your friend and your friends and not violate your lease becomes exactly what the task is about, Randolph. And you really actually put it out there. That is the answer, but you can't write it down in a book because it's a dance. It's a dance with the person.
Yeah.
So are we going to find them housing together? Are we going to try and find the buddy housing? Are we going to be successful if we help find the buddy housing? Maybe Marco moves someone else in because we didn't, you know, we didn't get, he's still lonely, and that's really the issue. So, you know, we need to work around to figure out exactly what's going on. But you guys had some great interventions there.
Yeah.
What about the other people? Did anybody talk about Rosa or Sylvia? Want to share a little bit?
We talked about Sylvia, for me and my group. We talked about Sylvia, how she's 60. She's been housed for 4 months. Her kids are grown. She has children who are raised by her mom and her sister. She's living in a shelter in Catmas, and she briefly stayed in Rappery houses. She had reconnected with her grandkids. She had connected, and she had just started getting her life back together, being consistent, being responsible, doing everything. But she is an ex-alcoholic. She was an alcoholic. She had stopped. She had got help with that, and now all of a sudden something has shifted, changed in her between mentally and emotionally. I mean, mentally, because she had started back drinking again. She hasn't paid her landlord. She loves to shovel and everything. For me, on that, the first thing I would do is try to talk with her, let her know that it's okay, and see how we can build a bond before we go into talking about receiving and directing her with the right treatments.
Reconnecting her, reconnecting her to you.
Yeah, and then work on helping her reconnect with AA, because obviously she was already connected with AA from the beginning. She had started using that because she was using harmful reduction. She had a harmful reduction specialist in her life. So using that, try to resort her back to her connections that were helping her and that was helpful for her. But one of my colleagues, LaShandra, she had first said that she's isolated. She just started isolating. She don't want to feel. She don't want to connect with anyone. She just walked away from everything. And to me, I think that's either don't want to be responsible role, because you know, some people have been homeless for so long. And responsibility and structure when that comes into play, and they feel like they gotta be consistent on it mainly every day. Some people are shut down and just close, just phase out and don't want to have that no more.
Well, and
It's hard.
she's been doing a lot of really good stuff, and it's
Mm-hmm.
hard to maintain that, right? And to keep it up. And that's what we see sometimes in phase 2 is people start to fall backwards a little bit because it's hard to keep that motivation going every day and to keep trying so hard. She's trying a lot of different things like medical, connecting with her kids, starting a business. This is an example of somebody who is really doing a lot and maybe a little too much, right? And your focus on the connections and reconnecting her to you and to people who have helped her is a really good idea. Lysandria, you want to say something too?
Yes, also recognizing the positives, your own place, reconnecting with your grown kids, paying rent, friends in the building, working with harm reduction, saving, decreasing your drinking, all the positives. Point out all the positive stuff. You're doing good, Sylvia. Look at this, look at this, look at this, you know.
But also be talking to her about that, right? Because sometimes reconnecting with your kids, particularly if you didn't raise them, there can be some anger with the kids. There can be, and things don't, remember that principle. I want to connect with my kids so we be a happy family. It may not be a happy family. So sometimes all the positives, people think that there's an outcome there and they don't always get it. So that connecting to those things that she's been doing and talking to her about that, about how those have worked out for her might be a really important step. I think it's a good idea.
And then also recognizing and acknowledging, look, Sylvia, you're doing a very good job. Your baked goods, your cookies, your cupcakes, they're good. You know, look at the relationship. Sometimes when you're doing some of these things is one thing, but being acknowledged for doing these things is another.
I agree.
You guys went right to really all this great energy to bring to Sylvia, which is so wonderful because, you know, she hasn't paid the rent in 2 months and you're looking at ways to really reconnect with her and connect her back to that place where she was feeling good about herself and working on a positive track, and she can get back there. I know we're running out of time, but did anybody want to make a comment about Rosa? Do you want to do that, Andrea, or you want me to just move on?
Yeah, and unless people want to say something, I think we ought to move on, but it's
move on because 15, we're not going to have time for the.
Yeah, we're not going to have time for the last exercise.
But any last comments or anything about Rosa? I don't want to give short shrift to that group, anybody who wants to talk about her. Okay, because we are our last breakout, we're going to save for the beginning of next week. So we get together and you guys start talking to each other right away. Something you seem to like to do. All right, so I'm going to keep us moving because we're in 1 2-hour session getting through all 3 phases of CTI. So normally a 6-month or 9-month process, but phase 3 is the step down phase. That's when we start to continue to taper our services, if that's okay, and the person's okay with that. You know, some people may need us to continue a weekly check-in, and maybe it goes to text as opposed to on the phone, or it's every other week it's on the phone and then it's a text, but we are stepping back. We're continuing to look at the services and fine tune things. So maybe they found a clinic they like, but they don't really love the doctor that much, like Andrea's example from the cardiologist, but can they change the doctor at the clinic where they're going, you know, really fine tuning those things. Or they've found some AA and NA meetings that they are attending now and really figuring out which one is going to be home base because they moved to a new neighborhood, you know, fine tuning those things. Maybe some things with school with kids, you know, where after a little bit of while, you know, we can really follow up and make sure those kids are continuing to get the resources they need, remembering that kids are eligible for a lot of special services for the whole academic year, during which time they've been in rapid rehousing programs. And, you know, this is not a training on McKinney-Vento education rights, but you can look it up and kids, I see some of you nodding, great. making sure kids get extra counseling and other services that they're entitled to, because they too are going through a transition. We're always addressing housing stability risks. So if the rent's not paid, if the garbage is collecting, if there are complaints from the neighbors, if, you know, there's destruction of property, there's non-payment, we are talking about that, we're addressing it, but also being mindful that as we step people down, we want to think about how are they going to address it if something happens in the future? What happens if the car breaks down, you know, after the rental assistance ends and you don't have that extra money, right? That could be a risk to you paying your rent. So what can we do? Is there a fund where you, there should only be a fund where you can get money for car repairs, free money for car repairs. I think some parts of California are trying to do that, but can we look at saving for that? You know, is that, or maybe getting a different car? But we want to always be talking about that, whatever it is, the risks to housing stability. If it is spending your money on something besides rent, which in addition to, I think crystal meth was mentioned, it might be children, which can be a money suck like crystal meth doesn't even know about, in terms of they needed new sneakers, they needed new clothes, right? They needed new things. It might be drugs and alcohol, might be clothing, might be eating out. But, you know, we always are looking for those other competing needs that people have. And that is back to why Andrea talked about employment and really made a big point about it. And income is, people are going to be struggling, and helping them get everything they're entitled to, using the food bank to stretch their budget, using the clothing bank, helping people have more resources is going to be one of the really final thing. If you're thinking about what else can we do, is really making sure they're getting, there's tax credits for low wage workers, there's all sorts of benefits. We ran a program for many years at CUCS where Andrea and I worked, where we were measured, our performance was measured by how much in benefits we got for people that they weren't receiving. And inevitably it was millions and millions of dollars that people were eligible for so many things that they weren't getting. So thinking about that, we're also stepping it back, and this is hard, can be hard for us, is to kind of let go and let the other resources take over. So, you know, that we are less and less the nexus with a person. And we also, you know, want to be clear with people about what happens after our time with them ends. Can they call us? Are we available? How will we be involved? I'm sure you all have some kind of policy around that. You want to make sure that they know that, and then what the plan is going forward, right? What is the plan to prevent eviction? Is the plan around income and employment? And I think for some of our folks, and you know, this has been helpful that, and you know, you guys are running rapid rehousing now, so I want to throw this idea out. But getting people like certifications through local community colleges, which can be a few months program, can sometimes be the perfect fit with rapid rehousing, because you're only getting assistance for a short amount of time, and some of those certification programs could be done at the same time, thereby enabling a person to earn a little bit more money, like a certified nursing assistant, or if you can get, you know, training like in food prep and kitchen things. So looking at income is really, really important in phase 3 and the longer term goals that people have, because they may have a job now, but they may have career goals, and that's going to help them succeed at work, right? We know when people have goals, they're more likely to succeed. So in this phase, you're about monthly with people, and you're still connecting with the landlord monthly. Again, working with the person on their plan for the future. There is a link in here to a wellness recovery action plan, which is good for people who have had mental health challenges and substance use challenges, or lots of crises, where they really talk about how they know when things are going south, what kind of help they want when things are going south or they're going into crisis, and planning for crisis. And Andrea mentioned moving away from crisis. We know people are going to have crises. We want to talk to them about that. We want to help them plan for those crises. We know it's always hard on the anniversary of your mom's death, right? That's one you might see in a RAP plan. So those kinds of things, it's a great resource. And then we also, and I think this just echoes what you guys all said when you were talking about the cases, is really reinforcing with people the progress they've made. You've paid month rent for 4 months. You started working as a cook. You right? Whatever, you made new friends, you settled in, you joined a club. We really want to make sure we reinforce the progress and skills. You learned how to negotiate with your doctor better. You have a new set of friends. You have a new place to go on Thursday nights. But we also want to be very frank in that planning with people about what we're worried about. That, just to use Randolph's example, I still worry that at the beginning of the month, when you get your money, you're going to want to spend your money on something besides the rent. Crystal meth, I think, was the example. So we really want to be frank, not in a blaming way, but in a problem solving way. So what can we do so that doesn't put your housing at risk? Can you budget for this? Can someone hold your money? What are the options? Let's talk about them and brainstorm them together. And there's a closing meeting. So one thing about CTI is we've talked about this over and over again. It's a defined manualized intervention. So when we're ending with people, the CTI intervention, again, you may be continuing working with folks. We have a closing meeting to really evaluate and give them a chance to give us feedback, right? We're hoping that they're becoming more critical thinking and evaluative with their resources, giving us feedback on what we did that was helpful. Discuss again ongoing challenges to the housing stability. Ideally, in the ideal world, you would have one big meeting with all the resources together to do a plan for people. And in our lives, we have never seen that happen, where you would have the sister, you'd have the therapist, you'd have the MD, you'd have their sponsor, you'd have everybody together work on a plan, but that can be really hard to happen. So you may need to have meetings with separate parties. Like if a sister, and I like that, you know, you guys are really connected to people's support networks. And if someone is involved and their sister or their family member is a good support, how can you bring them into this process to help them support the person and be a part of the plan to avoid crisis going forward? Is there something in the chat? Oh, thank you. Andrea just put the closing note form up there. This is, we also did, I think I attached that to the appointment if I didn't screw it up. Sorry, I'm on recorded on that. The closing note is a form, and I'm going to switch to it because it'll be easier to see on this. That we use for the final meeting with the person in CTI. So you can see your basics here. You have, sorry, I just got to move my windows a little bit. You know, who the person is, when was the meeting, what you discussed, tick boxes, ongoing challenges to housing stability, resources, progress, client feedback. So all the things I just talked about, what the long-term plans are, as what are the potential threats to housing stability. So we write this down. This piece of paper can go with the person, or it can be a Google shared Google Drive. What are the potential threats? So we really name those threats to housing stability. We see not enough income, conflicts, dissatisfaction with my unit, and we will continue to talk about that because if people are unhappy, it's not going to work. So we need to think about that. And then listing out what are the resources to help support this person. So who's the family, who's their friends, any really important community organizers and providers. And then what is your role, the rapid rehousing workers role after the closing date? Are you available? You're not. What's the contact information? And then everybody signs it. And this sort of becomes, and then you could give them a lovely certificate that says they completed CTI, which will make them feel really great. And document your final meeting and notes. And if a person comes back and you have, you know, this form, you're going to be able to pull it up and see what did we know, what did we not know, and what did we learn now? I see something in the chat. Andrea, can you?
Yeah, JC had to run off to another meeting, and she was saying, stay cool.
Stay cool. All right. We know we only got 3 minutes, so we're going to let you out a minute early today. It doesn't happen regularly, but we have breakout discussions for people in phase 3. So we'll open our session next Wednesday, same bat time, same bat channel, talking about Joyce, Keisha, Josh, Keisha, and Madi. So if you want to turn your cameras on and say goodbye, please do. We love to see your faces even just for a second. No judging of hair
Bye. Have a
styles or
good
makeup.
afternoon. Stay
Okay.
cool and
Thank you guys
hydrated.
very much. We'll see you
Bye,
next week.
everybody.
Thank you.
Hi,
So
everybody.
long,
Bye.
everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
I need to stop recording.
Yes.
But my buttons are not working.